A single hug from a little girl changed a homeless woman's life in a way no one expected. On a chilly afternoon, the city park was alive with the sounds of life children laughing, birds chirping, and the distant hum of cars passing on the busy streets nearby. People walked briskly, wrapped in coats and scarves, eager to finish errands or enjoy the brief warmth of sunlight that managed to peek through the clouds. In the midst of all this movement, on a quiet, slightly worn-out bench near the edge of the park, sat a woman. She looked small and fragile, almost disappearing into the layers of clothes she wore. Her coat was old and torn in several places, the fabric faded and frayed. Her hands were wrapped around a worn-out cup. Not just to keep her hands warm, but also to hold on to something that could feel like stability in a world that often seemed to overlook her. Her face was lined with weariness, the kind of tiredness that isn't just physical, but seeps deep into the soul. Her hair, once probably neat and cared for, now fell loosely around her face in strands that hadn't been combed in days. Her eyes, however, were striking. They held a mix of sadness, pain, and a quiet strength that spoke of a life full of struggles she had silently endured. She wasn't begging today. She just sat, watching people pass by, some glancing at her with pity, some avoiding her gaze altogether. It had become a part of her routine to blend into the background, almost invisible to the bustling world around her. From across the path, a little girl noticed her. She was holding her mother's hand, skipping lightly on the pavement, her small boots making soft thuds against the concrete. Her coat was bright, her scarf colorful, and her cheeks were rosy from the crisp air. Children usually notice the world differently than adults. They see things adults overlook. The little girl's eyes were drawn to the woman on the bench, not out of fear or judgment, but because something in the woman's stillness made her pause. There was a story in those eyes, a quiet loneliness that spoke louder than words. While other people hurried past, the little girl slowed, her curiosity sparking a gentle pull toward the unknown. She tugged slightly at her mother's hand. "Mom, who is she?" she asked softly. Her mother, distracted by her phone and the conversations of the day, barely looked up. "Just someone resting, honey. Let's keep walking," she replied, expecting her daughter to move on. But the little girl was not satisfied. She tilted her head slightly, observing the woman's face. The way she hugged herself, the way her gaze drifted toward the empty space around her. There was a sadness there that didn't need explaining. The little girl felt it instinctively. Step by step, the girl moved closer, her small heart filled with an inexplicable mix of courage and compassion. She noticed the woman's coat had holes at the elbows. The shoes were worn and scuffed, and her cup looked cold. Every detail seemed to pull at her young mind, making her want to do something, anything, to make the woman feel seen. Children often have a clarity that adults lose. They don't overthink social rules or fear awkwardness. They act from the heart. And today, the little girl's heart was guiding her toward someone who desperately needed to be noticed. If only for a moment, the woman noticed the child approaching. At first, she looked wary. It had been so long since anyone had approached her without an ulterior motive, without hesitation or fear. Her instincts told her to pull back, to retreat further into the safety of her solitude. But the girl's eyes, bright and open, held no judgment. They were filled with something the woman had almost forgotten existed: innocence and genuine concern. The woman's lips twitched in a faint, uncertain smile. No one had looked at her like that in a long time. The girl stopped a few feet away and looked up at the woman. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but confident. The words seemed tiny in the vastness of the park, yet it carried a warmth that wrapped around the woman like a gentle blanket. The woman's eyes widened slightly, unsure how to respond. Her lips parted, but no words came out immediately. She wasn't used to being greeted with kindness without expectations, without pity. The little girl, sensing no threat, tilted her head slightly, waiting patiently. A breeze rustled through the park, lifting a few fallen leaves around them, and the woman shivered. The little girl noticed it and instinctively took a small step closer, her tiny hand still clutching her mother's hand. Something about the child's presence made the woman feel less invisible, less like she was just another blurred figure in the city's constant motion. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to simply exist. not as a problem or a burden, but as a human being worthy of attention and care. The child's innocence created a bridge, across the gap of years and experiences between them. While adults often see homelessness as a problem to avoid or solve from a distance, the little girl saw a person who looked cold, tired, and alone. There were no complicated thoughts or judgments, only a natural, unfiltered empathy. The woman, unused to such straightforward compassion, felt her chest tighten. The years of isolation, the harsh words, the stares of discomfort from strangers, all of it seemed to lift slightly under the warmth of this child's gaze. The girl opened her mouth again, choosing her words carefully, though they were simple. "Are you okay?" The question was pure, unassuming, yet it carried more weight than the woman could have imagined. For a moment, the woman simply looked at her, searching the small face for hints of sarcasm, trickery, or mockery. Finding none, she allowed herself a small nod. She was okay in the simplest sense, but not in the way the world usually asked if she was. She was not okay in terms of comfort, security, or safety, but okay in the sense that someone, even someone so small, had recognized her humanity. The little girl smiled gently, and in that smile, the woman felt something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of hope. The girl's presence, her attention, her genuine curiosity, was a small but significant light cutting through the shadows of a long, hard life. It reminded the woman that not everyone passed by without noticing, that there were still pockets of kindness in the world, waiting to be discovered. Slowly, carefully, the little girl moved closer, bridging the invisible wall the woman had built around herself. She didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't overwhelm. She simply stood there, small but unwavering, offering the possibility of connection. And for the first time in a long while, the woman allowed herself to feel that possibility, to imagine that maybe, just maybe, someone could care without expecting anything in return. The little girl stood in front of the woman, her small eyes looking up with a mixture of curiosity and care. The woman, surprised by the child's boldness, froze for a moment. People usually walked past her quickly, glancing only to avoid eye contact. But this child had stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. There was no fear, no judgment, just a gentle, quiet interest that made the woman feel like she was being seen for the first time in a long time. Her heart, long hardened by the difficulties of life, felt something unfamiliar warmth. She hadn't expected it. She wasn't sure how to respond. The little girl tilted her head slightly as if she were thinking, and then in a small but steady voice, she said, "I think you need a hug." "Can I hug you?" The words were so simple, so pure, yet they carried a weight the woman hadn't realized she needed. She blinked, caught off guard. A hug? From a child? From anyone? She had spent so many days feeling invisible that even the idea of someone reaching out with care seemed almost unreal. Her lips trembled and she looked down at the girl, unsure what to do. She didn't know if she could trust this sudden kindness, if she even deserved it. The girl waited patiently, her hands slightly open, her expression hopeful. The woman's mind raced with memories, times when she had been touched with cruelty or indifference. Moments when she had wished for a kind word, a gentle hand, a sign that she was not completely alone. Her chest tightened, a lump forming in her throat. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen as human, as someone worthy of love or comfort. And yet here was this little girl, so small and so fearless, offering exactly what she had been longing for without asking for anything in return. Slowly, the woman nodded, almost imperceptibly, but enough to show the child that yes, she could. The little girl's face lit up immediately, a small smile spreading across her cheeks, and she stepped forward. The woman braced herself, unsure what to expect, her body tense. But when the girl wrapped her tiny arms around her, the tension melted like snow in the sunlight. The hug was brief, simple, yet it carried a depth the woman hadn't felt in years. It was not just an embrace of bodies. It was a connection of hearts, a quiet acknowledgement that she mattered. For the child, the hug was natural, instinctive. She didn't overthink it or worry about appearances. To her, it was simply the right thing to do, to comfort someone who seemed sad and lonely. For the woman, it was transformative. The warmth from the small body pressed against hers seeped into her very bones. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel it fully, almost afraid it would vanish if she blinked. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief, of a longing finally met. She felt remembered, noticed, and for a fleeting moment, she felt safe. As the hug ended, the little girl stepped back slightly, still smiling, her eyes wide with innocent understanding. "You're not alone," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The woman's voice caught in her throat. She wanted to say something, but the words felt heavy and fragile, trapped by emotions she had not shared in years. Instead, she nodded again, allowing herself to feel the reassurance in the girl's simple statement. It was more than words. It was a bridge back to a world she had long stopped believing included her. People in the park passed by, some glancing briefly, some looking away, but none interfered. Time seemed to slow for a few moments around them. The city's noise faded into the background as the two of them remained in their quiet bubble of connection. The woman realized how starved she had been for human kindness, for simple gestures that reminded her she was still part of the world. She remembered moments from the past, the warmth of a friend's hand, a hug from a family member, but they were distant, almost like memories from another lifetime. This hug, offered freely and without expectation, reignited a spark she thought had been extinguished. The little girl stepped closer again, her small hands clasped in front of her. She asked gently, "Do you want to sit with me for a while?" The woman hesitated, unused to invitations like this. Most people either ignored her or gave her pity in the form of spare change, not genuine companionship. But something about the child's innocence and courage made the woman want to say yes. She nodded, and together they settled on the edge of the bench, the girl's presence bringing a surprising lightness to the woman's spirit as they sat there. The little girl began to talk about her day, her small voice chattering about school, her friends, and her favorite games. The woman listened quietly, feeling a strange mixture of amusement and comfort. It was odd, she thought, how a child could bring laughter into a world she had assumed was all sorrow. Her eyes softened, and a small smile broke across her face, the first genuine one in what felt like a long time. The girl didn't realize it, but with every word, every giggle, she was lifting the woman from the heavy weight of loneliness that had pressed down on her for years. The woman's mind wandered back to her past, to the choices and circumstances that had led her here. The streets had not been kind, and life had felt relentless in its harshness. But now, sitting next to this small girl who offered nothing but love and attention, she felt the first tiny flicker of hope. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe there were still people in the world who could see beyond her appearance, beyond her situation, and recognize the person she still was inside. The little girl looked up at her again and said, "I like talking to you." The woman's chest tightened at the simplicity and sincerity of the words. In that moment, she realized how much she had longed for someone to see her as a person, not just as a problem to be ignored. This tiny being, with her bright eyes and fearless heart, had reminded her of her own worth, if only for a few moments. The hug had opened the door, and the conversation was a gentle step further, creating a fragile but real bridge between two very different lives. The afternoon sun dipped slightly, casting a warm glow across the park, but the cold air still lingered. The woman felt it less now, less sharply, as if the warmth from the child had created a small, protective bubble around her. She realized that human connection, even brief and unexpected, could be more comforting than any material possession. The little girl, unaware of the depth of the impact she had made, continued to chatter, her words light and easy. The woman listened, allowing herself to be present, to laugh softly, and to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, belonging. If only in a small corner of the world, by the time the sun began to lower in the sky, the woman felt lighter. She didn't know what the future held, or how long this moment of warmth would stay with her, but she knew she would carry it in her heart. A simple hug from a little girl had reminded her of her humanity, of her capacity to feel joy and connection, even amidst hardship. And for the little girl, the experience was just as profound, though she didn't fully realize it. She had offered kindness without thinking, and in doing so, had changed the course of someone's day, perhaps even their life. The woman shifted slightly on the bench, the little girl still sitting beside her, swinging her legs gently. For a moment, neither spoke, just enjoying the quiet closeness. The woman wasn't used to conversations like this. Most people passed by quickly, barely acknowledging her existence. But here was a child, small and curious, who had approached her without fear and now seemed genuinely interested in her life. She felt a nervous tightness in her chest. Talking about herself was not easy. Life had taught her to keep her story hidden, to protect her heart from the judgment of strangers. But there was something in the girl's wide, innocent eyes that made her want to try. The little girl tilted her head and asked softly, "Why are you sitting here alone?" Her voice was gentle, filled with real curiosity, not pity. The woman hesitated, looking down at her hands wrapped around the cup she had been holding. She hadn't told anyone about her life in a long time, not like this. But the question was simple, straightforward, and it allowed her to begin. Slowly, she began to speak, her voice low at first. She told the girl that she had once had a home, friends, and family. But over time, things had changed. Circumstances had pushed her onto the streets. She had been surviving alone ever since. The little girl listened quietly, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. There was no judgment, no interruption, only attentive listening. She asked small questions, like, "Do you get cold a lot? Do you have anyone to help you?" The woman was surprised at the depth of the child's concern. The girl's questions were simple, but they were filled with thoughtfulness. Each one made the woman feel seen and cared for. She explained that the winter was always the hardest, that sleeping outside or in shelters was difficult, that most days she had to find food wherever she could. She spoke with honesty, not dramatics. And somehow, it felt easier with a child listening. The little girl nodded, as if understanding every word, though she couldn't fully grasp the adult struggles of survival. Yet her empathy was real. "That sounds really hard," she said. "I would be sad too." The woman smiled faintly, touched that someone so young could recognize her feelings without judgment. She realized that the girl was showing her something she hadn't felt in a long time, genuine empathy. It wasn't pity that made her feel lighter. It was the acknowledgement that she mattered, that someone cared enough to listen. Encouraged by the girl's attention, the woman continued, telling small fragments of her life memories of her home, of friends she had lost touch with, of jobs she had held and then lost due to circumstances beyond her control. She spoke about moments of fear and loneliness, but also about small joys she had once experienced, like baking cookies or walking in the park. The little girl reacted naturally, sometimes smiling, sometimes wide-eyed in surprise. "I didn't know people could have so many sad and happy things at the same time," she said softly, making the woman chuckle lightly. That sound felt foreign yet comforting. Laughter, she realized, was possible even in her world of struggles. The conversation slowly shifted from memories to feelings. The little girl asked, "Do you get scared when you sleep outside?" The woman nodded. "Sometimes," she admitted, "especially when it's cold or noisy, or when there are too many strangers around. You always have to be careful." The girl looked thoughtful, as if trying to imagine what that would feel like. "That must be really lonely," she said. The woman's eyes welled up slightly, but she smiled gently. "It is. Most people walk by and pretend you're invisible, but today you didn't. You saw me." The woman realized how refreshing it was to talk without pretending, without hiding pieces of herself. The child didn't ask for money, didn't judge her clothes, didn't turn away. She simply listened, cared, and treated the woman as a person, not as a problem. The woman reflected on how rare this kind of attention was. Adults often approached her with fear, awkwardness, or pity, but the child approached with sincerity. It reminded her of her own lost innocence, the times when she had been small and unafraid, and it made her feel a strange sense of hope for the first time in years. The girl's curiosity didn't stop. She asked, "What do you like to do?" The woman thought for a moment, smiling faintly. "I like reading," she said. "And sometimes I like drawing, though I don't have paper or pencils very often anymore." The girl's eyes lit up. I love drawing. Maybe we can draw together someday." The woman laughed softly, a sound that felt like it could echo through the emptiness she had felt. "Maybe," she said, feeling a tiny spark of possibility ignite inside her heart. For the next while, the conversation drifted to small, everyday things. The girl spoke about school, her favorite games, and the animals she loved. The woman listened and responded, sharing her own small stories and laughter, feeling as though a weight had been lifted from her chest. Each word, each question, each shared smile built a quiet bridge between them. The woman felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years, realizing that human connection could exist even in unexpected places. At one point, the little girl looked up and asked, "Do you ever feel happy?" The woman paused, thinking happiness had felt like a distant memory, fleeting and rare, but sitting there with this child. She realized she did feel it, even if only in small moments like this. She said quietly, "I can feel happy sometimes. It's like now talking to you." The girl beamed. "I'm happy too. Talking to you makes me happy." That simple exchange made the woman's heart swell with an unfamiliar warmth. The woman reflected on how unusual it was to have someone care so much without expecting anything in return. Life had taught her to be cautious, to protect herself, to accept that most people either ignored her or gave empty gestures of help. But the child's presence was genuine, uncomplicated, and entirely unselfish. It reminded her that kindness could exist without conditions, that connections could form without barriers. It was both humbling and uplifting. As the afternoon wore on, the woman shared small stories from her past moments of laughter, small victories and cherished memories that had been tucked away in her heart for years. The little girl listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just nodding with understanding. Each story the woman told seemed to unburden her slightly, like pieces of her heart that had been locked away for too long were finally being released. And the little girl, in her simple curiosity, provided a safe space for that release. Before long, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. The little girl's mother called softly from a nearby bench, but the girl didn't want to leave just yet. She looked up at the woman. "Will you be okay?" she asked. The woman smiled softly, feeling a mix of gratitude and warmth. "Yes," she said. "I think I will. Talking to you has helped a lot." The girl nodded, satisfied, and gave her a small wave before returning to her mother's side. The woman watched the little girl walk away, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She realized that this conversation, so simple and short, had reminded her of her own humanity, of the value of being seen and heard. She felt a quiet sense of hope, a recognition that even in a world that often overlooked her, moments of connection and kindness were possible. It wasn't a solution to all her problems. It was a spark, a reminder that she was not truly invisible. Sitting alone again, she hugged her cup to her chest, but this time it was different. The warmth from the child's presence lingered in her heart, a soft, enduring glow. She realized that sometimes the smallest acts, small conversations, small gestures could carry the heaviest meaning. And she knew that she would carry this memory with her, a reminder that even in the midst of hardship, compassion, and human connection could still be found, often in the most unexpected places. The little girl and her mother walked a few steps away, but the woman stayed on the bench, feeling the lingering warmth of their conversation. The child kept looking back, tugging slightly at her mother's hand. The mother noticed her daughter's concern and stopped. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked softly. The little girl pointed toward the woman on the bench. "She looks cold, Mom, and maybe hungry. Can we help her?" The mother paused for a moment, her eyes flicking toward the woman. She could see the truth in her daughter's words. The woman was cold, her coat worn and thin, and her shoes looked like they had barely held together through months of wear. The mother nodded quietly. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what we can do." They approached the woman again, this time with small bags in their hands. The woman's eyes widened slightly as she looked at them, unsure what to expect. Most people either ignored her or gave her pitying glances. But this woman, this mother, was offering something tangible, something real. The little girl stepped forward first, holding out a small wrapped sandwich. "Here," she said softly. "I thought you might like this." The woman's hands trembled slightly as she accepted it. The warmth from the gesture made her eyes sting with tears. It wasn't just food, it was care, recognition, humanity. The mother smiled kindly. "We also brought some supplies," she said, opening a bag to reveal gloves, a warm scarf, a blanket, and some toiletries. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't received something like this in months. She looked at the items, then at the little girl, and back at the mother. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. The little girl shook her head. "You don't have to say anything." "I just wanted to help," she said simply. The honesty in her words was touching. It reminded the woman of a time when people helped without expecting anything in return. The woman carefully unpacked the items. The blanket was soft and thick, perfect for the cold nights she faced. The gloves would help her hands when the winter winds blew sharply through the streets. The scarf was warm and colorful, a little piece of brightness she could carry with her. Each item felt like more than just its function, it was a message. A sign that someone had noticed her, thought of her, and cared enough to act. She felt a swell of gratitude in her heart, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The little girl sat beside her again, holding her hand. "You look better with the blanket," she said, with a small smile. The woman chuckled softly. It was funny how a child could make her feel comforted just with her presence. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and felt the chill of the afternoon ease slightly. The small acts of kindness, the food, the blanket. The simple attention had made her feel warmer in ways she hadn't realized she needed. The mother suggested they share a meal together right there on the bench. She opened another small bag with sandwiches and a thermos of warm tea. The woman hesitated at first. She wasn't used to such generosity. Often offers like this came with strings attached, or people quickly retreated after giving something small. But this time, there was no expectation. No pressure, just simple, human kindness. She accepted the food and began to eat slowly, savoring not only the taste, but the feeling of care and attention that came with it. The little girl kept talking while the woman ate, asking questions about her favorite foods, what she liked to drink, and telling stories about her own school lunches. The woman listened and responded, finding herself laughing quietly at the child's innocent humor. It was strange and wonderful how a small child could make her feel alive again, even in the midst of so much hardship. She realized that joy could exist even in the simplest moments, sharing food, sharing warmth, sharing attention. After eating, the little girl helped the woman put on the gloves. "These will keep your hands warm when it's windy," she said. The woman admired the small size of the child's hands as she fastened them carefully, and it made her smile. She felt almost like someone cared about her, really cared. The blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the gloves on her hands, scarf snug around her neck haul. These small things were not just items. They were symbols of love, thoughtfulness, human connection. The woman began to feel lighter, as if a burden she had carried for years had eased just a little. She realized that it wasn't just the physical warmth she appreciated. It was the emotional warmth, the fact that someone had seen her struggle and chosen to act without asking anything in return. This was a new experience, one she hadn't felt in a long time, and it filled her heart with hope. Maybe the world wasn't as cold and indifferent as she had come to believe. The little girl leaned her head against the woman's shoulder, and the woman felt a rush of emotion. She looked down at the child, so small and brave, and wondered how someone so young could have such a big heart. The mother watched silently, proud of her daughter's compassion and realizing the impact they were making on this woman's life. Small acts, she thought, could ripple into profound changes. A sandwich, a blanket, and a conversation had already lifted the woman's spirit significantly as the afternoon faded toward evening. The mother suggested they help the woman find a nearby shelter for the night. She offered to accompany her if she wanted, but the woman shook her head gently. She wasn't ready to take that step yet, not after such a long time of independence, but she appreciated the offer. "Just thank you," she said softly. "I haven't felt this cared for in years." The little girl hugged her again, quick but sincere, and whispered, "You're special." The woman felt her chest tighten in a warm, unfamiliar way, and she nodded, unable to speak fully but feeling the truth of the words deep in her heart. The woman spent the rest of the evening with the items they had given her. Feeling safe and comfortable for the first time in a long time, she thought about the little girl and her mother, about their kindness and care. She realized that life, even when hard, could still hold moments of beauty and compassion. The food, the blanket, the gloves, and the scarf were not just helpful, they were reminders that she was not invisible, that she was still human, and that she deserved care. For the little girl, it was a simple act, a gesture of empathy she had given without thinking of the consequences or expectations. But for the woman, it was transformative. The small acts of kindness reminded her that even in the darkest moments, light could appear unexpectedly. She felt hope returning, slowly but surely, and she realized that this encounter could change her outlook on the days to come. Maybe tomorrow, she thought, would be a little easier. Maybe someone else would show her kindness too. The mother and daughter left the park with smiles on their faces, but the woman stayed behind, feeling lighter and warmer in every sense. The blanket wrapped around her, the gloves on her hands, and the scarf around her neck were physical comforts. Yes, but the emotional warmth they had given her was even more profound. For the first time in years, she felt seen, cared for, and human again. She knew this experience would stay with her, a memory of compassion that would remind her she was never truly alone, even in the hardest of times as night approached. She tucked the blanket around herself, sipped the tea the mother had given her, and thought of the little girl's smile. It was simple, innocent, and yet it had touched her more deeply than any act of kindness she had received in years. The small gestures of the day food, warmth, attention, care had changed her world, if only slightly, and for the first time in a long while, she believed that the world could still be kind. The woman sat on the bench long after the little girl and her mother had walked away. The park was quieter now, the laughter of children fading, the footsteps of passers-by slowing as evening approached. Yet the warmth from their visit lingered with her, wrapping around her heart like the blanket she had been given. She looked down at the small items, the sandwich, the gloves, the scarf, and the blanket, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Each one represented more than its material value. It was a message of care. Proof that someone had seen her, understood her, and wanted to help. It was a message she had longed for in the deepest corners of her loneliness. She thought about the little girl's words, about her smile, about the innocence and fearlessness that had allowed her to offer comfort without hesitation. The child had reminded her of something important, that kindness could come from anyone, at any time, and even the smallest acts could make a huge difference. The woman reflected on her life up to this moment. She had spent so many days feeling invisible, ignored, and unworthy. People had passed by her, glances full of pity or avoidance. But rarely had anyone truly looked at her and treated her as a person with feelings, memories, and value. Today had been different. Today, she had been seen, truly seen, and it had changed something inside her. The warmth she felt wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She realized that the human connection she had experienced, however brief, was more powerful than any material comfort she had received over the years. The hug, the conversation, the attention they had reminded her that she was still human, still capable of feeling joy, still capable of hope. She could feel a lightness in her chest, as though a weight she had carried for years had been lifted just slightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just safe, but noticed, cared for, and valued. As she sat quietly, she thought about what had changed for her. It wasn't just that she had received food or warmth. It was the realization that there were still people in the world willing to care without expecting anything in return. The little girl had taught her something vital, something she had almost forgotten in the harshness of life, that even small acts of compassion could ripple out and transform a person's entire day, even their entire outlook on life. She felt a sense of hope blooming, fragile but real. In her heart, the woman looked around the park, noticing the people passing by, the children playing, and the soft glow of the evening sun. She realized that she had been seeing the world differently since the encounter. For years, she had only noticed the difficulties, the dangers, and the indifference. But now, she began to see that kindness still existed. She remembered the little girl's fearless approach, the gentle way she had offered a hug, and the mother's willingness to help. Those moments were small, but their impact was enormous. They had reminded her that she was still part of the human community, that she had not been forgotten entirely, and that the world, though often harsh, could still surprise her with goodness. The woman thought about her future. She had often felt trapped in a cycle of hopelessness, thinking that her life would never change. But today, she realized that change didn't have to be dramatic or immediate. Even the smallest gestures of kindness could shift her perspective, giving her strength to face tomorrow. She felt motivated to seek out more moments of connection, to allow herself to trust in the possibility of goodness again. The warmth of the little girl's hug and the thoughtful gifts were proof that even brief encounters could carry lasting significance. She reflected on the lesson she had learned from the child. Empathy and compassion were powerful, and they didn't require wealth, status, or grand gestures. A smile, a kind word, a simple hug, or a small act of sharing could make a difference. She realized that while her situation had not changed drastically, her perception of it had. The weight of loneliness felt lighter, the world seemed less cold, and her heart felt a flicker of optimism. She understood now that hope could begin with small moments, often from the most unexpected places and people. The woman thought about the little girl, how her innocence had opened a door in her heart. Children see the world with clarity and simplicity, unburdened by fear or prejudice. The little girl had not judged her, had not asked for anything, and had simply acted out of pure care. That purity had reminded the woman of the value of simple kindness and had rekindled something inside her that she thought had been lost forever. The ability to feel joy, trust, and human connection. She picked up the blanket and wrapped it around herself once more. Feeling its comforting weight, it reminded her of the little girl's arms, the hug that had sparked the beginning of this emotional shift. She sipped the warm tea the mother had given her and thought about how small things, actions that seemed insignificant to the giver, could transform someone else's day entirely. She made a quiet promise to herself to remember this moment, to carry the memory of the child's kindness, and to allow it to influence her outlook moving forward. As the evening deepened, the woman imagined her own future, feeling the beginnings of a small but powerful hope. She realized that she could seek out connections, be open to kindness, and allow herself to experience joy again. Even though her circumstances were still difficult, she now believed in the possibility of good moments, moments that could restore faith and lift the heart. She thought about the people she had passed by without noticing, the ones she had ignored or overlooked, and felt a desire to pay forward the kindness she had received, even in small ways. The woman looked around the park one last time as the sky turned shades of pink and orange. She felt a quiet gratitude for the day, for the warmth, for the connection, and for the lesson she had learned about the power of small acts of empathy. It wasn't just about the food, the blanket, or the glove sit. Was about being seen, being heard, and being treated as a human being. That realization made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. She understood that even fleeting interactions could carry lasting impact, and that hope could be restored with just a simple gesture of kindness. Before leaving the park, she gathered her things and adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. She felt a deep sense of appreciation for the little girl and her mother. She carried the memory of their faces and words in her heart. Their kindness had reminded her that life could hold beauty and compassion even in the midst of struggle. The woman walked slowly toward the streets she knew, feeling the warmth of the encounter linger, and with it, a renewed belief that the world still contained goodness, and that she too was worthy of it, even as night fell. The memory of the hug, the conversation, and the thoughtful gifts stayed with her. She realized that the impact of human connection could extend far beyond a single moment. The warmth she felt was not temporary, it had left an imprint on her heart. She understood that hope could begin in the smallest interactions, that compassion could transform lives, and that even a brief act of kindness could ripple into something greater. giving strength, comfort, and belief in the goodness of the world. The woman felt lighter, more seen and more connected than she had in years. She knew that the world was not perfect, that challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt capable of facing them. The encounter had reminded her of the importance of small gestures, of human warmth, and of the profound impact that even a child's innocent heart could have on a life. She walked onward with a quiet smile, carrying the memory of the little girl's hug and words, knowing that her life had changed in a subtle but lasting way.